Chapter 1. Night shift 𝐬𝐮𝐻 hospitals. Night shift had its own rhythm, a quiet lull broken by sharp emergencies, whispered prayers, and the hum of machines. Elena Cruz moved through it like clockwork, her soft sneakers barely making a sound on the polished floors. It was nearly 2 a.m., and the emergency ward smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain-soaked concrete from outside. She had just tucked a feverish child into bed when the commotion began. Mel, late 30s, multiple stab wounds, possible gunshot to the abdomen, barked one of the paramedics as they burst through the automatic doors. Elena rushed toward them without hesitation. The patient was unconscious, blood soaking through his dark clothes. His jaw was clenched even in unconsciousness, his body taut with the kind of tension that came from a life of danger. His right hand, despite the blood loss, still gripped something tightly, a silver ring, smeared with red. "Let's get him into trauma room 3, Elena called, snapping on gloves. Her colleague sprang into motion. She leaned over him, her voice steady despite the rising urgency. "Sir, can you hear me? You're at St. Matthew's Hospital. You're safe now." His eyes flickered open, for a moment still grey, sharp even through the haze of pain, and locked with hers. It wasn't fear she saw in them. It was calculation, mistrust, and something else, desperation. "Name?" she asked gently. He blinked, then shut his eyes again, silent. They worked quickly. Elena's hands moved on instinct, clamping wounds, directing the surgeon, checking vitals. But something about this man nagged at her. No ID, no phone, no wallet. His clothes were expensive, yet blood-stained and torn like he'd been in a war zone. After surgery, while the others stepped out for a break, Elena stayed behind to monitor his vitals. She wiped blood from his cheek with a warm cloth, studying the sharp lines of his face. He looked like a man built from stone and fire, dangerous, but worn down. When he stirred, she leaned close. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, "but I need to know your name." His gaze slid to hers again. This time, he held it. "No name," he murmured, voice gravelly and thick with pain. "Don't tell anyone I'm here." Elena's heart thudded. She should report that. She had to report that. But something about his voice, his brokenness wrapped in steel, made her hesitate. She nodded, just once. She didn't know yet that in that moment, she had chosen not just to save a stranger's life, but to begin saving his soul. Chapter 2. The name he won't say. Morning. He was stable physically, at least, but Elena couldn't shake the tension that lingered in the room. Smoke. She reviewed his charts with robotic efficiency, yet her eyes kept drifting toward the man lying on the bed, his jaw locked, eyes closed, chest rising slowly beneath the thin white hospital blanket. He hadn't said a word since last night's whisper. No name, no details, no gratitude. When she entered with a tray, soup, toast, water, he looked at her, then slowly sat up, wincing with the effort. "You shouldn't be moving yet," she said, setting the tray on the side table. "But you probably know that, don't you?" His eyes met hers again, icy, impenetrable, but alert, alive. "You're not like the others," he said quietly. Her brows lifted. "Because I brought soup." A ghost of a smirk tugged at his lips, gone almost as soon as it appeared. She pulled a chair beside his bed and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "You need to tell me something, anything. I can't keep marking your chart with John Doe." He stared at her a moment longer, then turned his head toward the window. Grey London light filtered through the blinds, casting shadows across the angular lines of his face. "Call me Alex," he said finally. Elena wrote it down, not asking if it was real. She knew it wasn't, but it was something. "All right, Alex," she said softly. "Let's start with breakfast and go from there." For the next few days, Elena continued caring for him. Though he didn't speak much, he allowed her to check his vitals, redress his wounds, and sit in silence when the ward quieted at night. There was a tension in him, a restlessness even sedation couldn't suppress. He would flinch at sudden sounds, waking cold sweats. He never let anyone else in the room, only her. More than once, her colleagues asked questions. "Who is he, Elena? Why is he under John Doe for so long?" "He's recovering," she'd answer. "He just needs time." But deep down, She knew she was breaking hospital policy, knew there was risk in shielding a man who came in bleeding, weapon wounds scattered across his body, with no name and too many scars. Yet every time she looked into his storm grey eyes, she didn't see a criminal. She saw a man on the edge of something terrible, or something redemptive. One night, as she changed his fall, he finally spoke again. "Why do you help me?" She paused, then looked at him. "Because you needed someone too." He didn't answer, but his gaze softened slightly. The wall cracked just enough, and in that silent, vulnerable space, Elena Cruz began to see not just the patient before her, but the man hiding beneath the blood and mystery. Alex, whoever he really was. Chapter 3. Ghosts of the Past. Hospital's winter heating system hummed quietly as rain pattered against the windows. Elena sat in the staff lounge with a cup of lukewarm tea, her scrubs wrinkled from another sleepless night. She should have gone home hours ago, but her mind was elsewhere. Back in room 314. Back with him. Alex. She didn't know why he lingered in her thoughts. He wasn't warm. He wasn't kind. He barely spoke. But there was something in the way he watched the world, as if every sound was a warning, every shadow a threat. That haunted silence reminded her of someone else, of something she'd buried. Later that afternoon, she returned to his room and found him awake, his gaze fixed out the window, jaw tense. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. He didn't respond, but she took the chair anyway. They sat in silence until Elena finally spoke, not about medicine, not about his pain, but about something she'd never said aloud since coming to London. "I was supposed to get married once," she said quietly. Alex turned his head slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Back in Cebu. His name was Mateo. We met in nursing school. He was gentle, the kind of man who made you feel safe just by sitting next to him. We talked about everything: marriage, kids, building a small clinic together." Her fingers twisted the edge of her badge. "But after graduation, he left for a job in Dubai. Said it would be just a year. It wasn't. 3 months in, I found out he was engaged to someone else." Alex didn't move, but his stare had softened. There was no pity in his expression, only quiet understanding. "I came here after that. Needed to start over. Send money back to my parents. Keep my head down. Try not to feel too much." A long silence followed. Then Alex spoke, his voice low and raspy. "Trust is a luxury," he said. "It makes you weak." Elena glanced at him. "Or it makes you human." He looked away, jaw tightening. "Someone I trusted once. He was like a brother to me," he muttered. "Saved my life once. We bled together, built everything together. And then, one day, he sold me for power." There was no emotion in his voice, but the way his hands clenched the blanket betrayed him. "What happened?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "What always happens. People do what they think they need to survive." Elena didn't push. Instead, she reached for the untouched bowl of soup on his tray and set it on the bedside table. "You don't have to talk about it. Not yet. But you're safe now, Alex. Whatever's chasing you can't find you here." He didn't answer, but his shoulders eased just a little. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I think trust isn't a luxury. I think it's a choice. A hard one, but worth it." Alex didn't look at her, but as she stepped out, he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "You don't know what I've done." And Elena, with her soft heart and stubborn hope, replied without turning around, "Maybe not. But I know what you can still become." Chapter 4. Hidden beneath the sheets. It was past midnight when the silence of the hospital was broken by the distant squeak of shoes and the soft click of a door gently closing. Elena, on a short break, was sipping tea in the nurse's station when her pager vibrated violently. "Patient in room 314 missing." Her heart dropped. Elena abandoned her cup and dashed down the dimly lit hallway, her footsteps echoing off the sterile walls. She threw open the door to Alex's room. Empty. His IV line lay on the floor, blood trailing toward the door. Panic surged in her chest. "He's hurt. He can't be far." Without calling security, without alerting anyone, She followed the trail like a thread unraveling through the corridor. Her instincts kicked in, a strange mix of professional concern and something far more personal. She found him outside, collapsed near the ambulance bay, hunched against the cold wall beneath the red emergency lights. He was shirtless beneath his hospital gown, skin clammy, shivering, blood oozing from reopened stitches. But even in pain, he clutched something close to his chest, a folded slip of paper. "Alex," she breathed, crouching beside him. "What are you doing?" His eyes were fogged with fever and desperation. "Had to go. Can't stay. They'll find me. You'll die out here," she said, voice firmer now. "Come on, no hospitals, no records." She grabbed his face gently, forcing him to look at her. "I won't let them find you, but you need to trust me." For the first time, his defenses faltered. He nodded faintly, and she pulled his arm over her shoulder. It took all her strength to haul him into the staff parking lot, across the empty lanes, and into her little red hatchback. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted his seatbelt and glanced toward the hospital. She was breaking every rule, every protocol, but her gut screamed louder than the rules. She drove through the rain-slick streets of South London until they reached her neighborhood, a quiet block lined with brick flats and sleepy windows. No one would think to look here. Inside her tiny one-bedroom flat, she guided him to the worn couch and laid him down, rushing to grab clean towels and her nursing bag. "Stay still," she said, voice breathless but steady. "Let me fix this." As she cleaned his reopened wounds and checked his stitches, he barely flinched. Instead, his eyes wandered over her space photos of her family in Cebu, a small kitchen with rice on the stove, the cozy clutter of someone who lives alone but keeps it warm. "This your place?" he asked hoarsely. She nodded, focusing on his wound. "Just me. And now you, I guess. You shouldn't. You don't know what you're doing." "Yes, I do," she said quietly. "I'm helping someone who needs it." He winced as she pressed Gauze to his side. This is dangerous. For you." She looked up at him, meeting his eyes. "So he's living with a closed heart." He said nothing, but his gaze lingered on her, searching. Slowly, his breath evened out, and the tension in his shoulders faded. Exhaustion won, and he drifted into a deep sleep. Elena sat on the floor beside the couch, her head resting against the edge, watching the man who had just turned her world upside down. She didn't know who exactly he was, but she knew this. She couldn't turn him away. Not now. Chapter 5. A nurse and a stranger be mourning. The weight of what she'd done settled over Elena like a thick fog. She had brought a man barely more than a stranger into her home. A man with bullet wounds, knife scars, and a gaze sharp enough to slice through silence. Her training told her to report him. Her heart, stubborn as ever, refused. The flat was quiet except for the low simmer of porridge on the stove. Elena glanced over her shoulder at the couch where Alex lay, half covered in a blanket she had pulled from the linen cupboard. He hadn't moved much since collapsing, but now, as the morning sun bled gently through the curtains, he stirred. "Where am I?" His voice was rough, edged with confusion. "My flat," Elena replied softly, stirring the porridge. "South London. You're safe." He sat up too quickly, groaning as pain radiated through his side. She was by his side in an instant, firm hands guiding him back down. "You should still be in a hospital bed," she muttered. "But you're lucky I'm a nurse who breaks too many rules." He gave her a sideways glance. "Why did you bring me here?" "Because you were bleeding in the alley like a dying stray cat," she replied, half teasing. "And you would have died if I didn't." He huffed a dry laugh. "You really are reckless, maybe," she said, heading back to the kitchen. "But I'm not heartless." Over the next few hours, their delicate cohabitation began. Elena laid out ground rules. No wandering around, no looking through her things, and no taking off the bandages. He, in turn, responded with grunts and nods, still curt, but less guarded. By evening, she found him sitting upright on the couch, eyes scanning her bookshelf as she prepared dinner. "You read a lot of romance novels," he noted. She turned from the stove. "They're hopeful. They remind me not all endings are sad. You believe in happy endings." "I believe people can change," she replied. "That's not the same, but it's a start." He looked at her for a long beat. "People like me don't change. You say that like it's a fact," she said, ladling soup into 2 bowls. "But you're here, in my flat, eating my food, letting someone take care of you. That doesn't sound like someone who's beyond saving." He didn't answer. They ate in silence, the clink of spoons against bowls the only sound between them. But Elena noticed something. He didn't wolf down his food like a hardened fugitive. He ate slowly, as if remembering what warmth tasted like. After dinner, she offered him clean clothes, some old sweatpants and a hoodie that belonged to her cousin, who once crashed on her couch. Alex hesitated before accepting them when he stepped out of the bathroom in the oversized hoodie. She caught herself staring. He didn't look like the ghost from the anymore, just a man tired, scarred, and somehow softer around the edges. "Thanks," he muttered. She smiled. "You're welcome, Alex." He met her gaze, and for the first time, something unspoken passed between them. Not trust. Not yet, but the beginning of something that might lead there. Chapter 6. A taste of peace. Rain had stopped by the following afternoon, leaving the sky a pale, washed-out grey. Elena opened the window to let in the fresh scent of wet earth and concrete. Inside, the flat smelled of ginger and garlic, the familiar aroma of comfort and home. Alex sat at the tiny dining table, his injured side carefully propped with pillows. Watching her move around the kitchen was a stage, and she, unknowingly, the star of the show. "What are you cooking?" he asked, surprising her. Elena glanced over, eyebrows raised. "You're speaking in full sentences now. That's progress." He almost smiled. "Almost. Chicken adobo," she said, turning back to the pan. "It's a Filipino classic. My mom used to make it every Sunday after church. Smells like it could make a man behave." She laughed, the sound warm and free. "Then you'd better eat a double portion." He watched her with quiet curiosity as she moved around the kitchen, her hair pulled up messily, her hands moving with practiced grace. She was different from any woman he had ever known. She wasn't impressed by power or money. She didn't ask questions he wouldn't answer. She simply existed beside him, and somehow, that steadiness was more disarming than any interrogation. When the food was ready, she placed a plate in front of him. "Careful, it's hot." Alex stared at the dish, dark glazed chicken, steaming rice, and a side of pickled vegetables. Nothing extravagant, but it smelled like something sacred. He picked up the fork and took a bite. Silence stretched between them as he chewed. Then, "This is the best thing I've tasted in years," she grinned. "That's because you've probably been living off instant noodles and paranoia." Another flicker of a smirk. "You're not wrong." They ate together quietly. The television was off, the world outside forgotten. It was just the two of them, the clink of utensils, and the steady beat of a life momentarily untouched by violence. After dinner, Elena collected their plates and began washing up. Alex stood suddenly. "You don't have to," she started, but he was already beside her, slowly drying dishes with one hand while bracing himself with the other. "I can help," he said. "Not useless." She looked at him, and for a moment, he wasn't a Mafia commander in hiding. He was just a man trying to find his place in someone else's quiet world. "You're not useless," she said gently. Later that night, Elena sat curled on the couch, sipping tea while Alex lay back, a book open on his lap. The silence between them no longer felt tense. It felt lived in. He looked up from the book. "This, whatever this is, it's not going to last." She met his eyes. "Maybe not, but it's real, and sometimes that's enough." Alex didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't name. Not safety, not trust, but peace. And that terrified him more than any bullet ever could. Chapter 7. The men who came at midnight. First sign was the taxi. Elena noticed it from her bedroom window. A black cab parked across the street. Engine running, headlights off. It was the third night in a row the same cab lingered outside her flat for too long. Always around midnight. Always pulling away the moment she stepped outside. That night, She didn't sleep well. A dull throb of unease settled in her chest. Around 2 a.m., she crept into the living room, where Alex was asleep on the couch, one arm draped protectively over his middle. His breathing was calm, but his face remained tense, even in rest, like he was listening to danger in his dreams. The next morning, she brewed coffee with shaking hands. Alex noticed. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough from sleep. She nodded, but he didn't bite. "Elena, there was someone outside again," she admitted. "The same car, 3 nights now." He stilled. "Did you get a plate?" She shook her head. "No, but it felt off." Alex stood slowly, wincing as he straightened. "You should have told me sooner." "I didn't want to worry you," she said. "I don't get worried," he muttered. "I get ready." Something in his voice changed, low and sharp. She saw it in his eyes, to the return of that cold calculation, the survival instinct he'd kept buried since arriving. The man on the couch was gone. The commander was waking up. He moved around the flat carefully, checking the windows, drawing the curtains tighter. Elena followed, arms crossed, unsure whether to be comforted or afraid. "Are they people from your world?" "Maybe," he said. "Maybe it's nothing, but I don't take chances." That night, Elena left the hallway light on. The flat was still, but tension buzzed between them like static. Alex sat near the window in the dark, staring out through a barely cracked blind, his body perfectly still. Just after midnight, Elena watched from the hallway as Alex's entire posture changed. "They're here." She peeked beside him. The same cab, idling beneath a flickering street lamp. But this time, 2 figures stood outside it, men in black jackets, hands in their pockets, scanning the windows. Alex moved away from the blinds, his voice low and urgent. "Pack a bag. Essentials only." Elena stared at him, heart racing. "Alex, what's happening?" "They've found me. And if they're watching you, you're part of this now." She hesitated for half a beat, then turned, moving to the bedroom to grab what she could. She didn't ask questions. He had trusted her when he was bleeding in a hallway. Now, she'd return the faith. They were almost ready to leave when a loud knock echoed through the flat. Elena froze. Alex motioned for silence. He moved with quiet precision to the door, but didn't open it. Instead, he pressed his ear to the wood, hand inching toward the kitchen, where she kept a heavy cast iron pan. The knock came again, then a voice. "Hey, sorry to bother you. I'm a new neighbor downstairs. My cat ran off, and I thought I saw her come up here." Alex relaxed slightly, but Elena saw his jaw was still tight. When the man walked away, Elena whispered, "Coincidence?" "No," Alex said flatly. "It's a message. They're circling, testing. Next time, they won't knock." She swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Alex turned to her, his eyes dark with something she hadn't seen before, not just protectiveness, possession. "We disappear." And with that, the fragile bubble of peace they had shared burst. The past had come knocking, and it wasn't done with either of them. Chapter 8. Choices in the dark. They didn't leave that night. Alex paced the flat until dawn, ears tuned to every creak in the floorboards, every shifting shadow beyond the blinds. Elena sat curled on the edge of the couch, her small suitcase at her feet, waiting for his signal to go. But morning came, and they were still there, caught in the space between danger and decision. "I can't keep running," he finally said, voice quiet but firm. "I need to face it, but I won't let them use you to get to me." Elena looked up, tired eyes full of concern. "What does that mean, Alex? Who are they?" He exhaled slowly, then moved to the kitchen table, where he sat down across from her. For the first time, she saw the weariness in his posture, the heaviness of someone who'd carried too much, for too long. "You deserve to know the truth," he said. "But once I tell you, you won't look at me the same way again." "I'm still here," she replied. "After everything." "You think that's going to change now?" A long silence. Then he began. "My name is Aleksandr Volkov. I was born in St. Petersburg, but I've lived more of my life in the underworld than in the real one. I started young. My family didn't give me much of a choice. I became good at things I shouldn't be good at. I led men, enforced rules. I built an empire in London's shadows." He paused, eyes cast down. 3 months ago, someone close to me betrayed me. I was set up to take the fall for a hit I didn't authorize. My men turned. I was supposed to die that night, but I crawled away. I ended up in Eura. And the rest, you know. Elena absorbed every word, her heartbeat steady, but her mind racing. You've killed people, she asked softly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She looked away for a moment, tears threatening the corners of her eyes. Not from fear, but from the weight of knowing. I should walk out that door right now, she whispered. I wouldn't stop you, he said. I'd make sure you got away safe. But she didn't move. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice trembling. Do you regret it? Alex looked at her, and in that moment, she saw a man stripped of every layer. No armor, no bravado, just raw truth. Yes, he said. Every day, silence filled the room. Finally, Elena reached across the table and placed her hand gently over his. You saved me too. You know, she murmured. His eyes widened, confused. How? I was going through the motions, she said. Work, send money home, avoid getting close to anyone. My heart was numb. But then you showed up with your silence, your scars, your stubborn need to protect. And suddenly, I felt something again. He stared at her like she was a light he never believed in. I'm not asking you to be perfect, Alex. I'm just asking you to try. His hand closed over hers. Then I'll try. In that quiet flat, where fear lingered just beyond the walls, two souls found something that neither expected. The start of forgiveness. And the choice, however dangerous, to hold on to it. Chapter 9. A rainy day and an almost. London's skies opened up with a vengeance, drenching the city in sheets of cold rain. Elena gripped her umbrella tightly as she walked briskly out of the hospital, her long shift, her steps quick and head low against the wind. She hadn't expected Alex to be waiting at the corner hood pulled up, hands in his pockets, pacing beneath the awning of the nearby cafe. You didn't need to come, she said as she reached him, breath misting in the air. He shrugged. You shouldn't walk home alone. Her heart fluttered at the quiet care behind his words. She hadn't asked for it, but it was there, steady, unspoken, and unmistakably real. They started walking together through the nearly empty streets. The rain danced around them, their shared umbrella barely keeping the wind at bay. Elena kept close, their arms brushing with every step. I missed adobo night, she teased, trying to cut through the storm with a smile. He gave a faint laugh. I tried to cook rice. I nearly set the stove on fire, she gasped, half joking. My kitchen, still intact, barely. They stopped at a crossing, where the light blinked red, the puddles at their feet rippling with each drop. For a moment, they just stood there, two people tethered to a strange, fragile piece in a world that refused to stand still. You shouldn't have to look over your shoulder, because of me, Alex said suddenly, his voice low. Elena glanced up at him. I look over my shoulder because I care. That's a choice I made. You're not afraid. I am, she admitted. But I'm more afraid of walking away from something that matters. The light changed, but they didn't move. Instead, Alex slowly reached up, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. His hand lingered against her cheek, warm despite the chill. Her breath hitched, the moment stretching between them like a single thread about to break. Then, he leaned in, their foreheads touched first soft, trembling. Her eyes fluttered shut. His breath was uneven. But just as their lips were about to meet, Elena pulled back, not completely, not out of rejection, just hesitation. I can't, she whispered, heart pounding. Not yet, Alex nodded, pain flickering in his eyes, but not disappointment. He understood. I'll wait, he said. The rain fell harder, soaking their shoes, plastering her hair to her forehead. But neither of them moved to go, because that almost kiss, that delicate, breathless space between fear and longing, held more weight than any touch could have. It was a promise unspoken and unfinished, but real. Chapter 10. The betrayer revealed. Morning began quietly. Elena sat at the tiny kitchen table, sipping tea and watching the steam curl from the rim of her mug. Across from her, Alex stared blankly at the folded newspaper, though his eyes never moved across the page. Something in him had shifted since the night in the rain. He was quieter, tighter. "You're not really reading," she said gently. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he folded the paper with precision and leaned back in the chair. Fingers steepled. "They're getting closer." Elena set down her mug. "How do you know?" "There's a rhythm to this," he murmured. "First, they watch. Then, they send someone close." She sat straighter. "Someone you know?" Alex nodded, eyes dark. "Dmitri." "Who's Dmitri?" He hesitated, jaw tense. "My second in command. My best friend once. We built everything together. He's the one who betrayed me." Elena's breath caught. "You're sure?" "I'm never wrong about betrayal," he said, voice like cut stone. "And he's making moves now, sending messages. I can feel it." She searched his face. Beneath the hardness, she saw it hurt, raw and unhealed. Not just the sting of betrayal, but the grief of losing someone who once mattered. "How did you find out?" "I didn't want to believe it," he said, rubbing his temples. "But there were whispers, money disappearing, orders given behind my back, and then the ambush that nearly killed me." He was the only one who knew where I was going that night. Elena reached for his hand across the table. He didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He let out a bitter laugh. "I'm not looking for pity." "It's not pity," she replied. "It's sorrow for what you lost." His shoulders sagged, the weight of months, maybe years, slipping through the cracks. "I trusted him like a brother," he said. "And now he's using you to find me." Elena's stomach turned. "You think I'm in danger?" "I know you are," Alex said firmly. "Dimitri's smart. He won't come guns blazing. He'll look for your routines, your vulnerabilities. But I'm not afraid," she said, squeezing his hand. "We've come this far." "I am afraid," he admitted, voice cracking ever so slightly. "Not for me, for you." She stood and walked to his side of the table, kneeling beside him. "Then let's stay ahead of him, together." Alex looked down at her, this woman who had no reason to stay, no reason to care, yet never left. Something in him shifted again, not with violence, with resolve. "No more hiding," he said. "If Dmitri wants me, he'll have to come and find me." And this time, Alex wouldn't be the one bleeding. Because now, he had something worth protecting. Someone. Chapter 11. Taken. It happened fast. Elena had just stepped out of the hospital for her shift. The sun barely setting behind the grey clouds. When the world seemed to slow, a sharp scent hit her cologne, unfamiliar and too strong. Then a van door slammed. A hand clamped over her mouth. A voice whispered in her ear, cold and cruel, "Don't scream, Miss Cruz. We just want to talk." She fought back instinctively, but the grip was firm, practiced. She barely saw the faces before she was shoved into the back of a vehicle, and the door slammed shut behind her. Then, darkness. When Alex came home that evening, the silence in the flat felt wrong. Elena always left something, music playing softly, a cup half finished on the counter, the faint smell of ginger tea, but there was nothing, just stillness, and her phone left on the kitchen table. That's when his heart dropped. He scanned the room, the hall, the street outside. No notes, no call, no Elena. It didn't take long for the message to arrive. A small envelope slid under the door sometime after midnight. Inside, a single Polaroid of Elena, bound and blindfolded, her lip blooded, but her chin high. On the back, in slanted handwriting, "You should have stayed dead. Come alone. You know where." Alex stood frozen, the photo trembling in his fingers. He'd made a choice to protect her, to live quietly, to believe in redemption. But now his world had come crashing back, claws out. He stared at the photo again, memorizing every detail of her expression, not terror, but defiance. Even now, she was strong, stronger than he'd ever been. He could feel the old part of him stirring, the one he buried the night he stumbled into that the one she had slowly peeled away, layer by layer. Now, that part of him wanted out. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about her. And there was nothing he wouldn't do to get her back. Alex went to the closet, pulled out the one thing he had sworn never to touch again, a gun. clean and wrapped in an old shirt. He checked it quickly, his face stone still. Then he grabbed his coat, tucked the photo into his pocket, and stepped out into the London night. She had saved his soul. Now, it was his turn. Chapter 12. Fire and Rescue warehouse on the edge of East London was cold and quiet, its windows blacked out, its walls thick with secrets. It sat near the river, abandoned to most, but not to those who knew what it had once been, a place for executions, deals, disappearances. Alex stood across the street in the shadows, watching. Every light in the building was off except for one, a flickering bulb above a rusted door. Inside, Elena sat tied to a chair, wrists raw from struggling, lips blooded from a backhand she didn't flinch at. She wasn't crying. She hadn't begged. Even as her heart pounded and her head throbbed, she held on to one thought like a lifeline. Alex will come. Across the room, Dmitri paced, younger than Alex, but just as lethal. He wore a tailored coat and a smug grin. Funny, he said, crouching in front of her. I thought the girl would be just a tool, a weakness. But you've got bite. She said nothing, just stared at him with the same quiet fire that had undone Alex once before. Outside, Alex moved silently along the side of the building, remembering every step, every blind spot. This was the world he'd helped build, and now he would tear it down for her. He slipped through a back door, avoiding the guards only two, and made his way to the main floor. The voices grew louder. Dimitri's laugh echoed across the metal walls. You really think he'll come for you? Dmitri asked Elena, circling her like a vulture. Alex is good at surviving, not so good at saving. Elena lifted her chin. He already did. You're just a dead inside to understand. That's when the first shot rang out. One guard down. The second didn't even make it to his gun. The door burst open and Alex stepped in. Gun raised, eyes locked on Dmitri. Elena, he said, his voice a command and a promise. She looked up, and for the first time in hours, her breath caught, not from fear, but relief. Dmitri turned, laughing. There he is. The ghost returns. Let her go, Alex said coldly. This ends tonight. Dmitri pulled a pistol from his coat. You've gone soft. For a nurse, maybe, Alex replied. But even a soft man can pull a trigger. The standoff stretched like wire between them. Elena could feel the tension, electric and deadly. Then Dmitri lunged. One shot. Then another. Alex didn't miss. Dmitri dropped to the ground, the pistol skidding across the floor. Alex ran to Elena, cutting her free with trembling hands. He dropped to his knees, cupping her face gently, inspecting every bruise, every cut. I'm here, he whispered, as if he didn't believe it himself. You're safe now. She leaned into his touch, finally letting the tears fall. You came, she whispered. Of course I did. As the sirens echoed faintly in the distance, Alex wrapped her in his arms. There was blood on the floor, smoke in the air, but in that moment she felt more whole than she had in years, because the man who once brought death had chosen love instead, and the soul she believed in. It had saved them both. Chapter 13. After the storm, flat was quiet when they returned to quiet, like the calm after a storm that had nearly swallowed them whole. Elena stepped inside first, her limbs stiff and aching, but her heart finally beginning to slow. The place still smelled faintly of chicken adobo and old coffee, as if the chaos of the past few days had never touched it. Alex followed close behind, his face unreadable, movements cautious. He hadn't let go of her hand the entire ride home. You should rest, he said gently, guiding her to the couch. She sank into it with a soft sigh, the cushions familiar, the comfort of her home wrapping around her like a warm blanket. But the peace felt fragile now, like one wrong breath could shatter it. Alex crouched beside her, examining the bruises on her wrists, the dried blood at the corner of her lip. I'm fine, she murmured, brushing his hand away. You're not, he said, his voice low. But you will be. He stood and disappeared into the kitchen. She heard the sound of water running, a cabinet opening, the gentle clink of a spoon against a mug. When he returned, he handed her a cup of ginger tea the same way she always made it for herself. She looked up at him, startled, I watched you make it. Every night, he said softly. I remember. Her fingers closed around the mug, the warmth seeping into her skin, grounding her. You don't have to stay, she said suddenly. Not because of what happened, not out of guilt. He sat beside her, the space between them small, but heavy with meaning. I'm not staying out of guilt, he said. I'm staying because I want to. But, he looked down at his hands. I don't know if I deserve this. You. A life that doesn't involve running and blood. She turned toward him, reaching out to gently lift his chin. You came for me. You saved me. And you didn't do it with violence. You did it by walking away when you could have chosen revenge. His eyes shimmered, just slightly. That matters more than what you were. It matters who you're becoming. He looked at her for a long, aching moment. Then he nodded. I need to disappear for a little while, he said finally. Not to run, but to make things right. Close doors, burn bridges. The thought of him gone again made her stomach twist, but she understood. He needed to do this not for her but for himself. How long? She asked quietly. Not forever. She nodded once, blinking back emotion. He reached for her hand. Will you wait for me? I'll be here, she whispered. Not waiting like a helpless girl, but living, healing, trusting that you'll come back. He leaned in slowly, pressing his forehead to hers. I will, he said, because for the first time in my life, I want to come back to something. Double quotes, no. Someone. And with that promise wrapped between heartbeats, Alex stood, kissed the top of her head, and walked out the door, not running from his past anymore, but walking toward a future he never thought he could have. Chapter 14. Home is where you heal weeks past. The city moved on, as cities do, fast and indifferent, but inside her quiet South London flat, Elena held on to stillness. Life resumed in careful steps, hospital shifts, grocery trips, weekend phone calls to her family back in Cebu. But every evening, when the sun dipped behind the skyline and the shadows crept in, her eyes would drift to the front door. And every night, she told herself not to hope too much. Until one rainy Thursday. She came home late, soaked and tired, juggling her umbrella and a bag of vegetables, when she noticed something different. A pair of boots at the door, heavy, familiar. Her breath caught. She pushed open the door, and there he was standing in the kitchen. No time had passed, stirring something on the stove. Adobo, Alex said, without turning around. I remembered the garlic ratio. Elena dropped her bag and just stared at him. He looked different. Not in appearance. He still wore the same dark clothes, his hair a little longer, his jaw unshaven. But something inside him had softened. There was a calmness in his movements, a steadiness she hadn't seen before. He turned to face her. I told you I'd come back. She crossed the room in seconds and threw her arms around him. He caught her without hesitation, holding her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. I kept living, she whispered against his chest. Just like I said I would. I know, he murmured. That's what brought me home. They stood in silence, breathing each other in, grounding themselves in the warmth of this new beginning. Over dinner, she asked. What did you do while you were gone? He hesitated, then answered honestly. I made peace. Closed doors I should have closed years ago. Paid off what I owed. I burned the last of the bridges behind me. I don't belong to them anymore. She reached for his hand. And now, he squeezed her fingers. Now I'm here. And I want to stay. True to his word, Alex began a new life, not as a ghost hiding in the shadows, but as a man trying to give back. He started working at a local boxing gym, mentoring at-risk boys, teaching them discipline and control instead of violence. Some of them reminded him of who he used to be. Others reminded him why he needed to change. Every evening, he returned to Elena's flat, sometimes with bruised knuckles and aching muscles, but always with a full heart. They didn't rush anything. There were no grand declarations, no candlelit proposals. Just quiet mornings, shared dinners, soft laughter, and warm silences. They lived slowly, deliberately, with love blooming like a second spring, quiet, steady, and sure, because home wasn't just a place. It was a person, and he had finally found his. Chapter 15. Light in the shadow spring crept into London gently, softening the air and coaxing colour back into the grey city. Elena stood by the window of her flat, now slightly fuller with the presence of someone else's belongings. Alex's boots by the door, his books on the shelf, his jacket hanging next to hers. Everything was still small, still modest, but now warm in a way that spoke of something shared, something real. She had just returned from an early shift, her hospital badge still clipped to her scrubs, when she found him in the kitchen against sleeves rolled up, humming tunelessly, preparing her favourite breakfast. "You're spoiling me," she said, smiling. "I owe you a few thousand meals," he replied, placing a plate of garlic rice and eggs on the table. They ate together as they often did, quietly, content in the kind of silence that only love could fill. But something about Alex's energy was different today. He was restless, glancing at the clock, fiddling with his fork. After breakfast, he stood and walked over to his jacket. "Come with me," he said simply. Elena followed him, confused but curious, through the city streets. They walked to a park not far from the river, the trees just beginning to bloom with delicate pinks and whites. The sky above them was clear, the breeze soft and promising. In the center of the park, Alex stopped near a bench beneath an old oak tree. "This is where I used to come," he said, voice quiet. "Before I met you, to think, to be alone." She looked around. It was peaceful, unassuming, a place for someone running from everything. "I never thought I'd come back here with someone," he added, turning to her. "But then, I never thought I'd have a future." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small bouquet, simple daisies and sunflowers, her favorites, tied with a red ribbon. She blinked in surprise, her heart stuttering. "And I definitely never thought I'd want one." Then, from his other pocket, he pulled out a small silver ring. "No big speech, no kneeling. Just a look, quiet and steady, and words that needed no embellishment. Elena Cruz, you saved my soul. Let me spend the rest of my life returning the favor." She stared at him, tears already spilling over. Laughter caught in her throat. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, their hands trembling with joy. In the middle of that quiet park, beneath a tree blooming with the promise of second chances, Elena leaned into him. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her the way he once held fear, tightly, completely, unwilling to let go. Their kiss wasn't fiery or rushed. It was warm. Full of the kind of love that comes not in a burst, but a slow, healing bloom. Because the darkest souls weren't lost. They were just waiting for the right light to find them, and she had been his all along.